In his speech before a joint session of Congress, Donald Trump announced the formation of a new office in the Department of Homeland Security called VOICE, V-O-I-C-E, Victims of Immigration Crime Engagement. But we need a different voice, victims of ICE, with sweeps around the country resulting in detentions of DACA recipients. Some in the Asian American community are worried. I talked to one who actually went to see Trump's big speech on this episode of Emil Amok's Takeout. Hi, everyone, and welcome to what we are calling this podcast, Emil Amok's Takeout. My takes on all things about race, society, politics, and diversity, and everything those things touch in our culture and society, with respect to Asian Americans. And you don't have to be Asian American to listen, of course. All ears welcome. I'm Emil Guillermo, your host, and if you're asking, why Amok? Well, 15 years, or for that long a time, my Emil Amok column was a staple of Asian Week, what was once the leading Asian American weekly in English in the U.S. Amok was also the name of my compilation of essays, and Amok is on my driver's license. And that's not a bad Asian driver joke. So, thanks for finding us. Please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, and check out my writing at the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, the blog there, ALDEF, AALDEF.org/blog. Now, on this episode, we find ourselves in a mess of Trump. As I record this, a reality show prez has begun the talk show defense, bringing the office of the presidency to the rhetorical level of petty nonsense. The Trump-Russia connection remains the big news. That is that Trump surrogates had numerous contact with Russians before the election. Trump's best defense is distraction, tweeting out old pictures of Democratic leaders like Charles Schumer and Nancy Pelosi with Putin, and demanding an investigation. For what? A photo op? And then Trump takes a speculative rumination from a conservative talker who then is speaking out loud without facts about Obama wiretapping Trump Tower. Trump implies it's like Watergate, and then he tweets it out like fake news, which it is, only it's real news because he's the president. And this is the kind of behavior that presidents aren't supposed to be engaging in. It's the degradation of the presidency. But then, this is what we get when the country elects a birther president who built his political legs on fake news. And you thought with the speech before Congress, the so-called toned-down speech, everything would be all right. Well, nope. In fact, as I said in my Amok column, it's only worse. He knows how to play the game now. It makes Trump extremely dangerous. Now, for my thoughts on Trump's speech, it's on amok.com and on the player notes here. But really, I didn't think we were getting a new Trump. And in all the media, I bet you did hear from many DACA recipients in the media about their reaction to the speech. DACA, of course, Deferred Action on Childhood Arrivals. One thing I want to do in this podcast is to showcase real Asian American voices, the ones you don't often hear. I mean, regular folks who have a stake in what happens in the era of Trump 45. People like Angie Kim. New York Congresswoman Grace Meng invited Angie Kim, who's an organizing fellow at the Minkwon Center for Community Action in Flushing. She invited Kim to the speech, and in this podcast, less than 24 hours after she saw Trump, Kim talked candidly to me about how she felt being in the chamber of power, watching the joint address. When I talked to Kim, you could hear the planes flying in and out of LaGuardia. She talked about that key moment when Trump used the widow of Navy SEAL Ryan Owens as a prop. And she talked about how she remains undocumented and undaunted. On Emil Amok's Takeout, the voice of a young Asian American activist, Angie Kim. Angie Kim is a community organizing fellow at the Minkwon Center for Community Action in Flushing, Queens, New York. Brought to the U.S. at age 9 by her parents from South Korea, Kim qualified for President Obama's Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, also known as DACA, in 2012. It gave her the right to get a work permit and stay in the U.S. Now 32, her future is in jeopardy as President Trump has had a conflicting strategy on immigrants. Tough on what he calls the bad dudes, his term for, quote, illegals, but he says he has some heart for DACA recipients. Kim was invited to Trump's joint speech on Tuesday, and now Angie Kim joins me. Angie, thanks for joining Emil Amok's Takeout.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Angie, what was it like being there?
Well, you know, it was really surreal, for sure. I mean, it's not every day that people, regular civilians get to, witness, such a spectacle and the crowd and the event. So in that aspect, it was very profound. It was profound and I was struck.
Yeah, you say surreal. Mm-hmm. I guess it is kind of surreal where here are people you might see when you watch cable TV news, mm-hmm. and you might see them talk on news programs, and then I guess you must have seen a lot of those people, your favorite senators and congressmen, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've watched growing up and recently, especially in my adulthood, I've definitely caught up and watched, previous presidents' State of Union address and whatnot. And, it is you realize the things that you definitely miss out on when you're, sitting in your comfort at home, watching through television. I think there's certain aspects of about the event and sort of its atmosphere that you can only get when you're there, when you're present.
Yeah. Did it make you feel like an American?
I can tell you what I felt is you definitely feel a part of, a system. That's very present. You feel that you have a stake in your country, and that you have a voice, and I think that gives you a certain power. And yeah, I definitely felt that.
You felt powerful being there in the chamber.
Yeah, I definitely did. Powerful in a sense that you felt more connected to your government, and as opposed to, watching at home through television, you feel less of an audience and more like a participant, I guess. It's the best way I can put it. Mm-hmm.
But all right, so you felt like you had some kind of stake, and don't you find it kind of ironic though that here you are in this situation, and it's not clear if you really belong?
Oh yeah, there is definitely a lot of ironies, that I felt absolutely growing up personally, but also just by being there last night. Yeah, it's a very interesting sort of perception for me to grasp, especially as an immigrant and someone who has been affected by the previous president's executive order, such as DACA. There certain people will perceive you as someone who doesn't have a place in this society. And then you'll have, your peers and your allies and other people's, in your lives or in my life that feel that I am definitely a part of this society, and that I have contributions and I have a voice, and that I am a member, just like everyone else.
You talk about a very emotional moment. The big emotional moment of the speech was when the widow of Ryan Owens was introduced, the Navy SEAL who was killed in that Yemen raid. Some people feel it was a failed Yemen raid, but President Trump said it was a success. Mm-hmm. But what did you think when you were witnessing that huge applause that occurred when she was introduced?
It was, honestly, it was a difficult moment for me. It was one of those moments throughout the night that was hard for me to swallow, because in my experience, I knew how that kind of ovation or, empathy can be interpreted towards how it can be used to target a certain group of people in our society. So what I'm trying to say, I guess, is that it was very it was sort of just a one side of the story. And sometimes if that is sort of presented in a way where as if it's the whole story, I think, people tend to have a sort of misconstrued idea and build, certain opinions and make judgments on that. So it was, even though I felt, I sympathized with her loss, and I share my condolences. I did worry about the impact that would have on the rest of the members of the society who will be deemed as the evildoers and the criminals and what President Trump calls the bad dudes. So I think it was used to highlight or invoke a certain emotion out of the citizens of the United States and the members of the Congress, but I think it has to be more deeply thought about and discussed as to what had really happened.
Yeah, there's still some question about the raid. So it sounds to me like you're thinking that this was maybe the most emotional moment, but perhaps also Trump's most manipulative moment. I think that actually, I think you're right on that. I think, in a way, these kind of, what I call sort of, psychological tactics they can be very manipulative in a sense that you, sort of on the surface or at face value, you portray or you presume a certain, ideas and certain opinions, but how if it doesn't align with the actual truth, the truth is hidden at that point. So in that sense, I do consider it, partially manipulative and tactical as well. Yeah. Well, when you were there, did you join in on with the applause?
I did have my moments where I joined in. But I think my focus was to try to remain emotionally, politically neutral, at least for the duration of his address. It was a very interesting and sort of strange, vibe that you can get off of. Like the visitors are usually sort of on the top tier, so you're kind of looking down at all the members of the Congress, and you immediately, I think right off the bat, you can feel the division for sure.
You heard the president, despite saying things before the speech about how he was going to be maybe open to a compromise, he was pretty tough on immigrants, talking about a wall, building a wall. He talked about this new office for victims of immigrant crime. They were going to help them. And the tone of the speech, in the part that perhaps might have been more important to you and me about, the part about immigrants, seemed very anti-immigrants to me. What did it seem like to you?
Yeah, I totally agree. I was definitely shocked at when he mentioned about the specific enforcement groups that he plans to build, and I think there were it was a very a clear message that he was sending, and it was to me it definitely wasn't a compromise to what previous President Obama had worked on the issue of immigration. I think President Trump has his own agenda, his own plan, and I think he plans on seeing them through. The topics that he touched on in regards to immigration last night during the address he only touched on aspects of border security and internal security for the country. For example, he used immigrants as illegals and criminals and murderers, and he had guests in the address who were apparently affected by an illegal immigrant killing. And there were a lot of other aspects of immigration topics that he had left out, in terms of deferred action for childhood arrival. What's his plan for that? In terms of these young immigrant members who were brought to the country, such as we call them dreamers, who are here, and who are affected by this. He left them out completely. And I think that was intentional. I think it was intentional, and I felt that he had emphasized the whole issue of immigration and immigration reform solely as a national issue of national security. And, I don't know if anyone is, I've definitely noticed how he used, sort of, like I mentioned earlier in our interview, he used the term American in this very, in a very specific, as a specific noun, and I think it had a undertone of, division. So it was. It was definitely, it was a surprise for me, for sure. Yeah.
And it seemed like maybe it was rhetoric that would only fuel the terror talk. I mean, maybe increase the xenophobia. Did it make you fearful of Trump?
Well, I'm not sure that I felt fearful. I felt, I think I felt I was disappointed, and I felt a certain sadness that kind of overcame when I thought about the people who will be affected by such rhetoric and stereotyping. It's a very I find it's a very typical way for example, like when you think of a bully, like when you're growing up as a child and you have bullies in your school, I think it's one of their first tactics, right, to make you feel bad about who you are, or wrong about who you are, without any real reasons. So I thought, and when you observe that kind of behavior, it's hard to swallow, and I definitely felt very emotional, and I felt a certain fear and empathy for my immigrant community, but also other members of a community, who will be affected by his rhetoric, whether it be a religious group or certain groups of gender in our society. They for sure will be affected by his stereotyping of people, and so it was saddening for me.
Like, he did mention one thing. He did mention this merit immigration.
Yes, he did.
Did it strike you that he was tough on refugees, tough on immigrants in general, but he said maybe we should have this merit system where we get only the best. We cherry pick the immigrants. Do you like that idea?
I wasn't very thrilled about his idea of an immigration reform that's based on merit. I think that leaves, a lot of these sort of leeways and these, pathways where that can be interpreted and manipulated to benefit a certain group of members of our society, and leave the rest out. And, and that, I don't think that, that just doesn't solve the issue of immigration in this country at hand at the moment. It doesn't even touch, the issue at all.
I'm glad that you went to the speech, but were you at all satisfied with how he was going to resolve your own future as a DACA recipient?
I would have to say that in terms of his plans with deferred action and how that will affect me and all the individuals who receive DACA, I think it was completely left out. And I know that certain, people felt like it wasn't a part of, the conversation, and it won't be, and took that as an attack. In a way, but there was absolutely no satisfaction there. It wasn't mentioned at all, and I think a lot of people actually found that very surprising. Because it's such a sensitive topic. It was a sensitive topic for President Obama, and it is a sensitive topic for President Trump and for both parties when it comes to immigration reform. What do you do with these innocent young children who were brought to the country and didn't have a say in it?
And how about your parents? Are your parents still alive? And did they resolve their status, or are they in a kind of limbo too?
My mother, for example, she was able to adjust her status after 23 years. I think we were on the same boat for a long time. But it took 23 years. It took several generations, actually, because it's one of the it's a bit difficult to get into because it just gets into the legalities of immigration laws. But basically, my brother, who is her son, was able to adjust his status in the past 15 years and became a U.S. citizen. So now he had petitioned for my mother. So now we have what you call a mixed status family, and I now happen to be the only undocumented member in my family. And that also puts a certain amount of hardship and difficulties for my family members.
Again, I mean, and we have a whole situation, not just with you, but with other DACA recipients who may have been hoping for DAPA to come through, and that was held up by the courts, even though President Obama tried to get it through as an executive action. No mention of what happens there. So we have as a mixed family, you have the same sort of situation where things can happen to you and not happen to your parents or your other family members. You can have DACA kids separated from their parents, or DACA kids spared, and parents who didn't get adjustments, they get harmed. What do you tell what is your approach as a mixed family? And what do you tell other mixed families?
Yeah, I mean, I cannot emphasize enough the heartache and these trial and tribulations that these immigrant families have to experience and go through and deal with. It's really one of those things that, if you're not in their shoes, it's very difficult to wrap your head around it. But, as somebody who can also be affected by, a bad immigration policy, I also can be separated from my family. Obviously it would break anyone's heart to see a little child being separated from their parents, but my heart also would be broken. I can attest to that. If I was separated, if I was forcefully separated from my parents, even as an adult, I mean, it's your family. I think, anybody could at least imagine or have empathy for that, because we all have families. So, what I feel is I feel tremendous amount of, heartache. I sympathize and empathize with every member of, the 11 million undocumented immigrant individuals. I just want, I do everything that I can to give them some sort of comfort in the midst of fear and hopelessness. You do what you can to be there for each other, to support each other. Even if that means just listening. Even if you feel powerless to save someone, you do. It is. I feel obligated to do everything that I can. In every way. Did
President Trump's speech give you hope to fight the fear that you say some of these people feel?
In a way, I think it strengthened my belief and my commitment to fight for the members of the immigrant groups. The core belief is that everybody deserves the right to pursue happiness, and that's, I remind myself that's what I'm fighting for.
So I guess really my question is, do you trust Trump to do this for DACA recipients, for immigrants who are feeling distressed?
If there is any trust that can be built, I think it will take time, and I'm definitely open to that possibility. But I think that has to be built on a certain grounds where there is a mutual respect. And, you can't have respect if one person is being bullied or being attacked. So, I'm hopeful. I can say that for sure. And, the ultimate goal would be to build that trust. And hopefully President Trump can build that trust with immigrant members of society and everyone else. And hopefully he can uphold, our expectations and do what's right.
Well, I guess his words have to match his deeds first, right?
I think, I think we all, uphold one's trust based on one's, action, not on their words.
So, but as the only undocumented member of your family, are you really scared? I mean, is that really how do you cope? How do you cope personally with this idea?
It was only when I had gotten involved that I was able to find confidence, and I think I've definitely learned that through experience. It is true that with knowledge comes power, and to me that power meant confidence and belief when you needed it. And I think, the less knowledge you have, the more fearful you are, because you have no idea, you don't have any idea what to expect or how to deal with, situations. But I think with these great, amazing people that I met in the organization, and just watching them do what they do, and now I'm trying to sort of follow in their footsteps. The fear almost naturally just subsided, and your focus completely shifts to the things that you can do and you have to do, rather than feeling kind of sorry for yourself. So I've definitely learned to fight that through and build confidence about who I am, and not feel fearful. I mean, fear can be there, but I think it's a choice whether you want to let it affect you or not. So I think I've learned to deal with it.
Yeah. And now that you've seen President Trump's speech, you're ready to fight even harder.
Absolutely. I didn't need his, address to be any affirmation for me. I think that commitment was always there. But these moments and situations definitely kind of stir up, I think, one's emotions. So my emotions were, I can tell you for sure, it was stirred up last night. And, I had a lot to think about on my way back from D.C. And, sometimes it encourages you and it inspires you to work harder. And I've definitely felt that since being invited to the address. So, yeah. So that's the good thing.
Yeah, that is the good thing. Angie Kim, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And that's Angie Kim of the Minkwon Center in Flushing in Queens, New York. It sounds like she was on the runway there, dodging all those airplanes, but no, she's a pretty cool customer and ready for the continued fight for DACA recipients, a DACA recipient herself. And that's it for Emil Amok's Takeout. Check us out on the ALDEF blog at aaldef.org/blog, and on amok.com, amok.com, and on iTunes. Please subscribe, rate, and review. Thanks again for listening to Emil Amok's Takeout. I'm Emil Guillermo.